I am a psychologist, consultant, and executive coach for CMA, but in a past life, I was a therapist. So today I want to talk about the difference between coaching and therapy. So this is a nuanced question because therapists and coaches certainly use many of the same skills, right? You have a third party there that is devoted to supporting the client. To me, the big difference is that a coach is focused on performance, whereas a therapist is focused on well-being. If you think about therapy in general, what you have is a third party there that is just going to support the growth and the development in whatever direction that is of their client. So interventions are typically much softer. When a therapist wants to gather information, they're going to ask their client about their experiences. They're going to ask about their childhood. They're going to ask about what it's like, what a day in the life is like, what symptoms they might have, right? It's very much driven by the client's personal experience compared to coaching, where because the focus is on performance, the coach is going to look for actual black and white data. They're going to leverage 360 data. They're going to leverage performance reviews. They're going to leverage psychometric data because the coach's goal is to say, what exactly does work look like for you? How are you actually performing? And it follows then that the interventions are different. A therapist isn't going to try and steer the conversation in the same way that a coach might. So for example, in therapy, if a client comes in and says, hey, I'm getting back together with my boyfriend who mistreated me, the therapist may think that's a bad idea, but the therapist's intervention will typically be, why are you doing that? What does it feel like to do that? How are you going to protect yourself in that relationship? The therapist might even say, this is how it makes me feel, but the therapist isn't going to be directive. Comparatively, a coach would say, that's a bad idea. If in coaching a client says, I'm mistreating a direct report, or I'm going back to work for a bad boss, the coach would say, that feels like a bad decision to me. Why don't you try X, Y, or Z? It's typically much more directive and much more assertive because, again, the coach is pushing for outcomes, performance outcomes that a business is willing to pay for. And the same is true for the end of coaching versus therapy. In therapy, there typically isn't a clear end point, unless, of course, insurance is paying for it and you've got 10 weeks or whatever. But there is no clear timeline. And at the end of that 10-week period, the therapist isn't going to say, did we accomplish our goals? Traditionally, it's how do we feel? Was this of value to you? In coaching, a business has paid for this process and they want to know, hey, are you any better at X, Y, or Z? So typically a coach will check in with managers. They'll do pulse interviews with key stakeholders. They might even do a mini 360. The idea is at the end of the program, the coach can say, hey, here's what we worked on. Here's what we accomplished. And also, here's what we haven't worked on. And here's areas in which you didn't grow. Again, the focus is all on performance. Now, unquestionably, it is really important in both cases that the coach or the therapist has a fantastic relationship with the client. Without a relationship, without trust, without connection, coaching and therapy don't work. In both cases, the client has to feel comfortable to share transparently what they're dealing with. In either case, that relationship is key to success. So thank you so much for listening. I hope it was helpful.